Hey, NC.
How's it going?
Not bad.
Happy
not bad.
post-election day.
That's right.
And
It's
rainy
Wednesday. Right. Talking to you from the past again. Wow.
Yes.
And this is like actually it's very fortuitous with our guest today.
Yeah.
It's a very electoral, politically inclined podcast today.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool. So what's going on with you?
I want to give a shout out to Alderfolk, newly appointed Alderfolk, Barbara Foushee. Congratulations. Well deserved. I know you worked really super hard campaigning.
I think she got
excited.
more votes than the next three combined or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't want to.
People wanted her there. That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, it was I guess you can't use the term landslide, but it was she was strongly favored in those results. So that's great. So.
Also, the other exciting result, not out of North Carolina, but out of Virginia, Danica Rom, is it Rom?
I think it's wrong, but
Rom?
I'm not positive.
Who won in what county?
Prince William.
Prince William County, which I wasn't sure what that was. Phil was like, "That's Manassas." I was like, okay. I know Manassas.
It's
I know
like
several people from Manassas.
it used to be the cultural dividing line between Northern Virginia and quote unquote the real Virginia.
Yeah, sure. Nova.
Yeah.
Northern Virginia.
It's a little more complicated than that now because of all the ex-urban development and stuff.
Yeah.
People moving, between that and Fauquier County. But it's so satisfying to see her.
First openly transgender.
Virginia.
Legislate? Would you say legislature?
Virginia
Yeah.
General Assembly.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
House of
I
Delegates.
think I heard on the news that there have been other transgender legislatures, like maybe one in Boston that came out after they were elected, but this is the first openly transgender. Like everybody knew.
And she went
This
against
person.
She went against Delegate Marshall, who was, I think he self-proclaimed himself as the homophobe, I think, and he,
Disgusting.
obviously North Carolina folks were religious. He tried to start his own version of that bathroom bill in Virginia, and so it
makes her defeat all the sweeter.
Gratifying.
Yes.
And she did it right. She campaigned on actual local issues. The big thing was, I think, the Route 28 traffic. That was just apparently, it's horrible. I mean, it's Northern Virginia, and that area is just horrible traffic-wise. But so she actually went for that, and I think Marshall would not use the right pronouns. I mean, was really insulting,
Right.
and just so it's nice to see someone kind of. Get their comeuppance.
Right on. And fun fact, she also fronts a metal band, right?
Yeah,
I saw a video. Pretty awesome. She does some pretty sweet.
She's
got some sweet hair that thrashes around.
She's got that pointy guitar, that heavy metal pointy guitar. Yeah. That's
Who
great.
else? There were some other, I think.
Well, Northam won, right?
Yeah.
So there's a Democratic governor in Virginia again, although, I mean, it was between him and Gillespie. Ed Gillespie was like a Republican. He's an establishment Republican, but he got dragged further to the right because of, I guess, sort of the Trump effect and needing to satisfy that. I mean, if you look at the electoral map of Virginia, it's like, I think Roanoke City went Democratic, went blue. But pretty much outside of some of the Tidewater, the Charlottesville, and Northern Virginia, it's all red. So you're still seeing that divide of the heavily populated areas of those kind of states, and North Carolina as well, where the urban metropolitan areas go blue, but the rest of it doesn't.
Speaking of metropolitan areas going blue, I think I heard, if I'm remembering this right, African American woman was elected as mayor of Charlotte.
I have not heard that. I haven't had a chance to look at that.
I believe I did. I might be wrong, but I thought I heard that. That's pretty cool.
So it wasn't Robertson, was it? So that means Roberts lost. Was it Jennifer Roberts? Yeah.
So,
And there was.
I don't have my smartphone with me to confirm. And people can tell me I'm wrong.
That was one of the things about HB2 was that they were wondering if she was going to get dinged for some of the maneuvering, I guess, post with the municipality bill and trying to withdraw it and things like that, or if people were going to hold her accountable for kind of not sticking to her guns. So.
Yeah.
Well,
what else is going on? We survived camping.
With
gosh, how many other people? It was like
a lot.
It was like
lot.
18 other people, majority kids. We were dominated by kids. Jack got sick. We were close enough that I could bring him home.
There's nothing like being sick out in the woods.
Yeah,
I think,
vomit and diarrhea. I mean, vomit you can do that in the woods, right? Vomiting, that's not a big deal. But diarrhea, no.
You just want your bathroom at that point.
Yeah.
You know, you just want to be miserable in your bathroom.
Yeah, that was a fun adventure. I think knowing that we had gone through that, even with a sick child, and the little one loved it.
I know.
He's down for doing it again.
Yeah.
I think he was in his pajamas the whole weekend.
He loved it, yeah. And I think we actually got relatively decent sleep because there was enough sprawl room, so he wasn't right up on somebody, which is.
He was all snuggled in the sleeping bag.
He loved the sleeping bags. That was great.
Cozy.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. I got my Husker box set. So
right
on. Woo! Gotta sit away from the mic.
Even had like Husker tape around the box, which was super cool.
So
the
great. I've been waiting for that for a while. I mean, I was the guy that I decided, I need to get the CD version as well so I can listen to it in my car. Because I'm probably like one of the few people that still have a CD player in his car. I mean, that doesn't have I don't have the iPhone or the iPad, iPhone thingamajigger hookup, so I have to go by CD. So, very, very excited. A little sad because I wish Grant was still around. Although given how contrarian Grant could be, you got to wonder if at some point he'd be like, whatever. We put it out, blah blah blah.
I think knowing Grant, he would probably have something snarky to say, just because he's, I don't know, just part of his personality. He's got to have at least one critique to kind of put a stamp on it, But then I think he would, like, if somebody interviewed him, he would probably give accolades and be really proud.
Well, he was instrumental. I mean, I think I read some interview about the box set saying he was one of the big movers and shakers in making sure it was done correctly, and he was obviously graphic arts. Actually, Henry Owings, a shout out to Henry Owings, he did the graphic package. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. So I'm really excited, and I'm also I have mixed feelings because it's like I said, I'm Grant was a friend, and I got to play bass with him for a little bit, and that was fun. And he just it'd be nice to see. Husker never really got the same kind of due like the Replacements. I mean, they got their due in the sense of influence.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the extra tracks release, and they've had such contentious legal problems with their record label for their classic records that that may never ever. I mean, this record, this box set, that's all stuff that Husker actually owns. Once you get into like Flip Your Wig or Zen Arcade and all those records, it's going to be a totally different ballgame trying to get that stuff. But, like I said, it's nice to see them finally have like that. And I think Pitchfork gave it like a reissue of the year and everything. Yeah. So, I'm excited.
Maybe one day you'll share your Grant Hart stories with everyone. We've got some good ones.
Yeah.
We have our cat as a result of Grant Hart.
Yeah,
coming to our house.
Mojo the cat, yeah.
Mojo Nixon.
Well, so you want to announce the guest today?
Yeah, so we have Representative Graig Meyer. He is a representative of parts of Orange and Durham counties.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm excited to talk to him. I ran into him at another event.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we got started on it, but we both had cats named after the Beat Generation. So I'm like, you're a cool dude. So you know, he's obviously doing amazing things, speaking for the people. But it's cool to hear like these little stories.
Yeah.
To get a little personality on people that are representing you.
He's scary smart too. Mighty Neighborly did a like a town hall, I guess, about redistricting, and at some point I was like, I can't follow this anymore. This is like, he's like just walking us through. And at some point he lost me. I was like, in the back of the trail looking for the breadcrumbs. All right. Well, also some general podcast notes. We are trying to put music on this thing now, so you may get music, or maybe not, depending on how successful we are.
And music by none other Phil and the Venables.
Yeah, and because it was free.
Right, exactly. I don't know. I think it's pretty good.
It's at some point I'll talk about that, I guess. But so we're doing that. Folks that listen to the podcast, and if you subscribe via iTunes, if you want to maybe put a little review down or something, that would be cool. Of course, always keep letting us know what you like, what you hate, and please feel free to email us at heyncpod@gmail.com.
Yeah. Also find us on Facebook.
Facebook. That's right.
You can contact us. You can message us. You can leave a comment.
Yeah, and we're on the Twitters. I sort of handle the Twitters. Yeah, I do the Twitters, but it's nice. It helps sometimes. I think
I can only handle one social media thing.
This is the point. See, we're maxing out on the media. I think we've reached that escape velocity where you're like done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back with Graig Meyer. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of those highfalutin electoral things, but one thing that especially was told when I came over, man, we're going to talk about music, aren't we? So
I'm excited to be on a music podcast.
Okay.
I talk politics all the time, and here I am at Hey NC, and you guys talk music. And
we do.
I like music better than politics. In fact,
Oh.
I would make the argument that musicians are much better at explaining our political reality than politicians are.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
How so?
I mean, would you rather listen to a great punk rock song or to Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They both make me angry.
Or even a terrible punk rock song. I'd probably rather listen to.
Correct. Yeah. But I mean, I think the arts in general are often ahead of political discourse in kind of diagnosing the underlying factors of what's happening in a place and the mood and people's kind of gut level responsiveness to it. Yeah. The arts have the courage to say things and demonstrate them that politicians don't yet have the courage to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm burned out on politics, what I need is to go see a paper hand puppet intervention show, or to go to the North Carolina Museum of Art, or to show up at the Kraken and listen to a punk band play.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, if you can say that, if you can push that out there, I need to do my part.
Well, there's no posturing. In politics, there's a lot of posturing, and there's a lot of, fake stuff going on. You don't really know what they really mean or what they really want to do. There's a lot of heart and art. Ooh,
right.
Heart and art.
Exactly. Head and the heart.
So you were saying that you wouldn't actually be down in this area if it hadn't been for DJing, was that?
For Sonic.
Yeah, right. I mean, part of why we moved to Chapel Hill was because of music. My wife and I are both from Ohio. I grew up in the city. She grew up in the country. We wanted to look for a place to live that had the best of both worlds. We could live in the country but have access to big city culture. And I knew about Chapel Hill because of that Sonic Youth song, and and I was a Super
Jesse
Chunk
Helms.
fan, and yeah, I mean, I was a college radio DJ like you were saying in the mid '90s, and there was all this great stuff coming out of Chapel Hill, and so I knew about the Chapel Hill scene, and we came to visit here the year before we moved here, and when we were driving through Carborough and I saw the Cat's Cradle, I was like, oh, this is it, we're coming here. And here we are. The music has never disappointed me.
What was your first show when you landed here?
Ooh, I don't
Do you remember?
remember that. No, wow, what was the first show I saw at the Cat's Cradle? I don't remember. I don't know.
So another way of determining where was the Cat's Cradle when you got
So
here?
it was at its current location in Carborough. I got
Okay.
here. We moved here in '98.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it had been there for a couple years. The 506 was there obviously, but stuff like the Lizard and the Snake had already
Right.
closed by the time we got here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, I
Lizard
remember
Snake,
that. Yeah.
So
I saw
honestly,
the Donnas there.
we missed Chapel Hill's heyday. I'll be honest about that. We got here after the heyday was done. But when we got here, I think the Zippers were still intact.
Yeah.
Certainly Superchunk was still playing a decent amount. I mean, I saw the tail end of those bands.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun going on. Sleaze Fest. That's now
Sleaze Fest
defunct.
was still
Yeah,
happening
that
when
was
we
still
first got
around.
here. Yeah.
In the hot month of August.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are some legendary shows. Yeah, but now I'm really racking my brain to think what was the first show I saw at the Cradle, and I don't remember. I mean, I've seen so many shows at the Cradle.
Well, what's your
Over the
favorite
years.
North Carolina band? I mean, one of. I know it's hard to have a favorite.
Yeah,
What are you digging right now?
What am I digging right now from North Carolina? I need some new ones. Because I haven't, this year, I don't think I found a new North Carolina band that I fell in love with. I did see Plank Eye Peggy from Asheville play at the Kraken, and I know they've been around for a while, and I thought they were incredibly entertaining.
Oh, I don't know them.
They're like
I like the name though.
Yeah, they're really fun. I got their album, and I make a mix CD every year of my favorite tracks from that year, and I don't think they have anything that's good enough on recording to make it on, but they are a pirate gypsy punk band,
Oh, that's fun.
and yeah, they were a blast on stage.
That definitely sounds different. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, they're just another one of those pirate gypsy punk bands that are jumping on the pirate gypsy bandwagon.
Are you into like fuzz and psychedelic music at all?
Some, who should I
So
hear?
there's like Asheville has a lot of good stuff going on right now. Nest Egg, you should check them
Oh,
out.
I
They're
don't know
pretty
them.
good. Do you like Joy Division?
I was never a big Joy Division
Yeah,
fan.
okay, that's fine. That's cool. I was going.
No.
Yeah, what was that band we saw? Convoy.
Yes,
They were really
Very
good. Very Joy Division-esque.
Yeah.
I dug their sound. But yeah, I mean, I like going to Hopscotch every year because the day shows you get a lot of local stuff and it's free. All the day shows are free, and then at night it's like you get to see all your friends play or bands from other places in the state to play, and Solange or Big Boy,
Right,
which
right.
is super cool.
Pretty
You can
amazing.
see
Yeah, yeah.
everybody at this kind of local
Yeah,
festival.
well, we're very lucky to have such great music options here. My favorite festival is Merle Fest.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a treasure. I think the ability to interact with artists there is unlike a lot of other festivals, and the way
Yeah.
that people collaborate there is really fantastic. I love the whole ethos and feel of that festival. But I still just get most of my music in small clubs on Friday and Saturday nights. So it's been the Kraken recently because I can walk there.
Right.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
it. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So is that why did you have a job or anything when you came here? Or were you going to
No,
school
we
or
literally
anything?
chose to move here with no jobs, didn't know anybody.
Oh, okay.
We had criteria. We wanted a place where we could live in the country, have big city culture.
Uh-huh.
We had just adopted our daughter. We wanted a place to raise a family and an interracial family. And it had to be a zone 7 for my gardening wife.
Oh, okay. What's
We
a
are a
zone?
zone 7.
Right.
Yeah.
It basically means you can grow stuff pretty much all year long.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
It's like
okay.
a hardy thing.
Yeah.
That's so funny because I was just looking up tea plants because I'm really digging my oolong tea these days. So I was like, oh, I wonder if I could plant a tea tree. And a lot of them do well in zone 7. So I was like, yes,
Oh, there you go.
it's possible.
Yeah. You've been to the Honeysuckle Tea House, right? I mean,
Oh,
they've
yeah.
got all
Yeah.
kinds of tea plants
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then there's do you know what the Keith Arboretum is? It's a hidden private arboretum in Orange County that a professor from, I think he was a Duke professor, a child psychiatrist, just started to bring in all these woodland species of trees from around the world that can grow in North Carolina, and it has more diversity of different types of trees from our climate zone than any other arboretum in the world, supposedly.
I love Orange County.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
And so they have a bunch of stuff from China there that's pretty interesting. I was there yesterday and saw a Chinese ginkgo tree that was in its final stage before its leaves drop, and it was gorgeous. And you can see it on my Instagram.
My parents would totally. I need to get on your Instagram, but my parents, they garden a lot. They would totally love something like that. They're master gardeners. That's what they did when me and my brother flew the coop.
Cool.
And they bonded more.
Where do they live?
In Danville,
Yeah,
kind of
so
out in the
right.
out in the country.
But similar climate to here.
Yeah,
Similar,
yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, they even have like a desert garden where they built a little desert
Wow.
with cacti.
Oh yeah, it's something
great.
like you
It's
have to
pretty
not have
amazing.
kids to
They
do
have-
that. I
Right.
They
think,
have
you
a
know.
circle of grasses where it's just nothing but different types of grasses in a circle, and then they have like an English garden, and then they have this other like
Wow.
shade garden. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not the gardener in my family. That's all Jen. She's-
I am in my
gardens,
mind. I can do
yeah.
a couple of things, but yeah.
She does the animal husbandry, goats,
Whoa.
chickens,
Wow.
all that. It's not.
So what?
Please,
So
yeah.
you have goats and chickens, and you were telling me what the
Oh, we're having
yeah,
this conversation.
your cats are named after beat poets, writers.
No,
right?
our dogs. So
Your dogs are
yeah,
right. My cats were.
Your cats, right?
Yeah.
So right, we've had 2 dogs named after beat poets. Your cats were, and then what was the other? We made the connection on goats, or was it somebody else? Our goats are all named. Not our goats. Our chickens are all named for 1960s female country singers like Patsy and Dolly, or for women who are named in Beatles songs.
That's so
like
great.
Penny for Penny Lane.
Love it.
Oh man.
That's awesome.
So once you got here, did you go to school around here, or were you already bachelored up or Bachelor of Arts, or?
We came here after I finished graduate school,
Oh, okay.
and I feel sometimes like Jen and I are the only people who live in Orange County who have no official relationship to the university.
No, that's me too.
Yeah?
I,
All right.
you know, I already had my bachelor's, and and I mean, Shannon's got more, even though she didn't go to college at UNC. She's got
worked
more.
there.
Yeah.
I took one like grad school Southern Lit, class.
Yeah, when I got here in 1997, it was like, you got to pick a team. And I was like, huh? And they're like, UNC or Duke. What's your basketball team? I was like, my school was infamous. George Mason University was infamous for having one of the worst basketball teams on earth. So basketball was not I did not have a particular dog in any fight of that. We didn't have a football team, so we were like, okay, sure. I liked those guys. Sure, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I use it as a political excuse when people want me to pick a team, and I say, look, I represent both Durham and Orange counties, and I
That's
need
right.
to be able to pull for any of the fine institutions of
Right.
higher learning in my district. And I didn't go to any of those schools, so I can cheer for them
Well, that's
all.
good. See, you're not really you don't have that implied bias. You
Yeah.
can be universal, right?
It's a cop-out.
Right. So
Political cop-out.
you do social work when you're not in the General Assembly?
I'm a social worker by training. I do educational consulting.
Oh, okay.
I've always worked in schools. And so what I do is I do racial equity work with schools and youth-serving nonprofits. So we work with them on closing the achievement gap, college access for students of color, addressing institutionalized racism in schools, a whole variety of things. And it's fun. It's good work.
That is good work.
Now, have
I mean-
you seen improvement in North Carolina along that lines, or?
In some places,
Yeah.
I mean, we as a state, we have not really directed our work on education to be focused on inequities over the last few years. There are certainly other states that we could follow their lead where they've really had broad systemic approaches to addressing inequities. And we have huge, huge problems in North Carolina with achievement gaps and post-secondary enrollment gaps, all kinds of things that are very easy to measure. But we haven't had leadership in the legislature or really in the governor's office or even in the Department of Public Instruction that has made addressing racial equity a priority. And that's something that I would love to work on in my political career and have tried to.
Do you think the existence, how charter schools are kind of gaining more, interest in the state, do you think that hurts or helps racial equality and achievement gaps?
It does both. There are some instances of charter schools being a response to the persistent failure of schools to address the needs of marginalized communities, communities of color, low-income communities, and so charter schools launch to try and do a better job of addressing those needs. And when they do actually do a better job of addressing those needs, kids are well served, and that creates a more equitable learning environment. On the other hand, you have situations like in Durham where charter schools are essentially creating both segregation and other types of division in the community.
Yeah.
What I worry about in a place like Durham is, have we hit the threshold where actually the overall level of support for public schools has fallen too far because too many people have taken their kids out of the schools, and the traditional public schools just become a school of last resort, and then you're in kind of a downward spiral. I hope it's not too late for that in Durham, and my wife is a teacher in Durham, and I think she would say that it's not too late for that, but that the charter school policy environment that we have in North Carolina makes it really easy for charter schools to become white flight havens. It makes it really easy for communities to have a balance where it's really hard for the public schools to sustain themselves after a certain number of charter schools are set up. We don't have any control mechanism for that.
Yeah, I think, for me, I lived in Durham for a time, and it always reminded me of sort of the problem of a urban environment of sort of like good neighborhood, good school, not so great neighborhood, not so great school. And I, as a parent, I guess you don't really want your child to be part of a social experiment. It's one thing to be like everything needs to be copacetic for everybody when you don't really have a child in there and in the public education thing. It's another thing when suddenly your kid is going to a school and is not developing in a way that you want to. I can sort of see the argument for charter schools, but the problem I've always had it with Durham charter schools is it sort of seems, like you said, a way of opting out, yet simultaneously wanting some of the tax advantages of a public school.
Which the frame that gets talked about in public policy around this is the frame of choice. And I don't like that frame. I think that parents want a guarantee that their child is going to have access to a good education. And we only have to move to a choice if we're failing to make that guarantee real in all of the educational opportunities that are available. And so if we only are providing a choice and only some people have access to that choice, that means you're leaving a whole bunch of people behind.
Right.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that ability.
Correct.
And I know it's not just a matter of like this school versus this school. It's a matter of transportation. A lot of the public schools have the bus infrastructure, whereas the charter schools don't. So it's like, can your parents get you there? A lot of kids don't have parents that have the flexibility that can get them to a school that has other resources.
Yeah.
So,
and that there are ways that some charter schools set themselves up to make them a little bit more exclusive so that certain parents don't have as much access to them, and I find that problematic in that they're publicly funded schools.
Yes.
On the other hand, there are charter schools that serve low-income communities and do provide busing and free lunch and do an amazing job, and I like those schools. I would never want those schools to go away because they're really serving kids well and doing important work. So it's not an easy either-or situation with charter schools. And that's part of why it continues to be a topic of debate politically, is because it's not cut and dry.
So was education work what kind of got you into wanting to be part of politics in North Carolina?
Yeah, so I worked on college access. I ran a program for the Chapel Hill schools called Blue Ribbon Mentor Advocate. That
I
was
remember that, yeah.
responsible for helping kids go to college. And we helped hundreds of kids go to college in the 16 years that I ran that program. It was great. But I got frustrated in that helping every kid kind of get to college individually meant constantly going back to the same problems with a dysfunctional system. And I wanted to fix the system. And the only way that you can fix a system like a school system or a healthcare system or a child welfare system is to be involved with policy. And policy is impacted by politics. And so I didn't feel that as a social worker I could do my duty to the people that I wanted to help without being involved with politics and trying to impact those higher level changes.
And is the representative your first office, or?
Yep, I
Okay.
got appointed to this seat in 2013,
Okay.
and then elected in 2014 and 2016. And when I ran in 2013, that was the year where the first year that Republicans had complete control of the legislature,
I remember that.
and they did a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of bad education policy that year. And so when I ran for the appointment in November of 2013, my platform was basically one plank. It was basically, don't you think it would be helpful to have someone who was actually working in the schools to go to Raleigh to be able to fight for these issues? And in our community that really values education, that one line was enough to get people to support me.
That's awesome.
And then I got there and realized all the other stuff.
Right,
going on.
right. I was
Yeah.
gonna say. So, did you kind of keep your head down initially and kind of just focus on your education
Oh, no,
plank,
I-
I guess, and then you
I'd
just sort
imagine
of.
you just rolled your sleeves up.
yeah,
just
I'm
got
sick-
right in there.
6'5". I don't
Yeah.
usually keep my head down
Yeah.
very well.
Well, only when you
Thank
need to
you.
go through a door. It's all right.
Zing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Terrible. Terrible
Yeah,
dad joke.
I rolled right in.
Okay.
I think certainly on the issues that I cared about. When you're in the legislature, you don't have to be the expert on every issue.
All
So I got to be able to talk about things in public when people ask me about them. But in the legislature itself, there are things that come up that I care about a lot. Like this year, one of the few positive things that happened was we raised the age of juvenile court jurisdiction in
Right.
North Carolina from 16 to 18, the last state in the country to do so. That's great. That's very important. I know
Better
that
late
impacts
than
this.
never.
Correct. But I didn't have to work on that issue or argue on that issue on the floor debate, even though I cared about it, because we
Right.
had other people who were carrying that.
Okay,
load.
that's their.
Yeah.
Now, do you consider yourself sort of a centrist Democrat or more progressive? How do you look at yourself on that spectrum?
I mean, given today's political labels, I'm a progressive,
Right.
which I think reflects the community that I serve. Although I'm not always as progressive as people think that I am or expect that I am, and I think there are some things where in my personal life I'm probably a little more conservative than in the policies that I think are best.
So, are you evaluating like when you're a representative, the policy, how it impacts North Carolina in the long run, or I know like obviously politics is kind of the art of compromise, and you've got to have some short-term gains to make it to have a long-term gain. How do you juggle all that?
Well, Democrats are in the super minority in the legislature right now, so I don't have the ability
Right.
to make a lot of progress on things that I care about, and I don't have to make a lot of compromises. My
Right.
job on most kind of big public controversial issues is pretty clear, that I need to argue against what the Republicans are trying to do, and I push the red button for a no vote when the time comes. When you're in the majority, I think you have to do a lot harder work to find compromises, to build coalitions together, to vote for things. And so I haven't had that opportunity yet.
Okay.
When I look at things, when I look at, let's say I look at something that the Republicans are bringing forward and try and decide, what am I going to do on this? Maybe it's not a clearly defined ideological issue that I've already taken a stand on. I'm trying to think about it for the first time. Then I use a fourfold test that I actually teach to fourth graders when I go talk to them about how does government works in North Carolina. Does it make us safer? Does it make us healthier? Does it make things more fair? And does it make us more prosperous? And if it passes those four tests, then I'll support it. If it doesn't, if it only passes one or two of those, then I have to make some moral judgments.
Right.
But that's what I'm looking at.
Oh, I know we're talking a lot about politics, but I wanted to talk more, go back and talk more about your music interests.
This is my kind of interview. You want to make the connection? I have a record player in my office at the legislature.
Nice.
And so when
So what's on there right
constituents
now?
come in, what's the last thing that I spun on there? Was I think right at the end, we had a special session recently where the Republicans were messing with our court system. They're doing a real partisan takeover of the court system. And one of the consequences of a judicial gerrymandering bill that they passed is that it's going to probably kick out about 40% of African American judges in our courts statewide, which is a travesty.
That is.
Right.
That's terrible.
And so I often pick a record of the day that has a theme to match whatever's happening that day. And so that day I played Bob Dylan's Hurricane,
Oh, yeah.
which is one of the greatest songs about
Yeah.
racial justice that's ever been written. So
Yeah.
that was what was on there recently. I also use it when people come into the office. I invite them to pick out a record to play, which it's my record collection. Whatever they pick, we're both going to like it. So it gives us something to start with. And sometimes it's fun and funny. Like Margaret Spellings came in one day, and she and I, we actually have a good working relationship, but recognize that we're not on the same side of the political aisle. But we both want to see the university system succeed. But she came in while House Bill 2 was still on the books. And I said, you want to pick out a record, President Spellings? And she pulled out the Bruce Springsteen live box set. And she said, well, we got to listen to the boss. It's the only way we're going to get to hear him in North Carolina. I was like, oh, that's funny. I like that out of you. Yeah. It was great. Or there was a day where some guys came in from the Wounded Warriors Project, and they were clearly very nervous to speak to legislators. They'd never been around to talk to people before. And I was kind of nervous because I've never fought in a war. I don't know what they're coming to tell me. And so I said, pick out a record. And this guy pulls out a Beastie Boys 12-inch. And he starts to tell me how he listened to the Beastie Boys on loop the whole time he was on 2 tours in Afghanistan and how that got him through.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, man, that's great. Let's put it on.
Wow.
And so I put the record on, and I could just visibly see him relax. And it
Yeah.
became such
Oh,
a
wow.
different conversation. It was really magical.
That's what music does for me. Like, I sit in a cube at work. So it's like I hear all this chatter, and I work with numbers. So sometimes I have to zone it all out to help me focus and, find errors and formulas and stuff like that. And what I listen to when I need to focus is like John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. When I am racing against a deadline and I'm really I can feel my blood pressure going on, I put on Astro Gilberto, to kind of put me at an ocean seaside, calm me. But music totally does that for me. When I'm cooking these days, I'm listening to a lot of Billie Holiday, just to kind of, just relax at the end of the day and just, make dinner. And it's just, it totally transports me, gets me, does something with my emotions, and puts me in, it helps my mind, put it all into good pieces, unpack it, I guess, unpack the day.
Yeah, if I'm at the legislature in the morning and I'm just trying to read stuff or get some stuff done before we really get going, I might put on Keith Jarrett's Cone concert and just listen to that in the background. But if I'm getting ready to go up to the floor and it's time for a debate and I know it's going to be kind of intense and I need to get a little bit ready for it, I need my spirit to get lifted, then maybe I'll put on the North Carolina Music Love Army and listen to some good contemporary rock and roll hymns and
they would
get
love
pumped
to
up.
hear that too.
Oh,
That's very
they've been
cool.
great to me. I love those guys. So yeah, that's how I use it too.
All right, so you mentioned I've never heard the phrase super minority. Did you come up with that? I think you should put a trademark.
No,
on
that's
it.
a political insider term.
Yeah,
We use the
yeah,
jargon,
yeah.
super majority, super minority.
Yeah.
So now I've been reading this book, and as everyone can plainly see now, it's called The Once and Future Liberal by this guy he's a professor up north, so you know.
Where all the
everything's going
liberals
on.
are.
Say it like that, North.
Because I live in the South. Anyway, it's called by this guy named Mark Lila. And I was going to read this passage real quick and get your take on it. Resistance will not be enough. Our short-term strategy must be to direct every bit of that energy into electoral politics so we can actually bring about the changes we profess to seek. And our longer term ambition must be to develop a vision of America that emerges authentically out of liberal values, yet speaks to every citizen as a citizen.
Amen.
Right.
Right
Oh, yeah,
on,
no
brother.
problem, pal. That easily
That's
said.
great.
It. So how do you? I mean, this. As someone who is I guess a progressive in North Carolina, it seems like you're staring down the barrel to get to anything close to breaking the supermajority that the GOP has. How do you see that playing out favorably for Democrats at all?
Well, let's look at what's already happened. So North Carolina had our Trump revolution in 2010 and 2012.
Exactly.
We lost the legislature in 2010. We lost the governor's seat in 2012. The whole state was red. We saw in 2013 what Republicans were capable of doing. They haven't stopped with that. And it was really foreshadowing to what is likely to happen in D.C. if and when the Republicans there ever get their act together. I mean, the only thing that's saving us from devastation at the federal level is the fact that the Republicans can't agree with themselves. So what happened in North Carolina? Well, first we saw the rise of the Moral Monday movement.
Yes.
And Moral Mondays did some really incredible things. Publicly, it gave people kind of a moral center for resistance of not just what are we against, but what are we for?
Yeah.
What are we
Yeah.
arguing? What do we want for people? And who are we for? And how do we come together? Those things are important. And then in our infrastructure, it meant that all the groups that advocate for specific things came together to support each other so they were no longer siloed or fractured.
Mm-hmm.
The people who fight for LGBTQ equality were going to support the women's health organizations when it was their issue that was on the chopping block.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was the environment, those two groups were going to come and support the environmental organizations. They understood that we have to kind of stick together on these things. And that doesn't usually happen in progressive political circles. So that
Yeah.
was huge. Then that laid the groundwork for those of us that are elected officials to stand together and to build on that. And helped us to have a way of describing who are we, what do we believe in, and what are we fighting for, which I think is the point of the passage of the book. And so in 2014, we actually picked up seats in the legislature. Democrats had a net gain of seats. And then in 2016, we elected Governor Cooper. We flipped the Supreme Court when we elected Mike Morgan. And again, we picked up seats in the legislature. So even though North Carolina went for Trump in 16, and even though both 2014 and 2016 were big election years for Republicans nationwide, Democrats have been making progress here for the last two elections.
Yeah.
We're already on the Democratic revival.
Yeah.
We've already figured out how to explain to people the vision that we're trying to present. We have to get better at that. There's some communities that we haven't reached. There's some communities that we really haven't reflected well in what our message is and what we're fighting for. And we have to continue to hold ourselves accountable to some of the things we profess to believe in, but maybe don't always live up to. But I think that there's hope that we're actually doing better in North Carolina than Democrats are nationally, where they're still trying to figure out what do we do after the 2016 election.
How do you keep people engaged? You know, like, I don't know. The thing that bothers me the most are the vote. You know, the voter turnout numbers. Like it saddens me. I mean, I know there are several variables. It could be transportation. It could be they're just not sure of what what's on the line, what the issues are. Could be that they're just
Don't have the day off.
don't have the day off, or
Yeah, I mean,
they just don't. I mean, but how do you motivate people to?
in 2016, 30% of eligible North Carolinians did not show up to vote.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
that's a lot of
I mean,
people.
for any democracy in the world, that's a very low turnout. This week in the municipal elections, I think the largest turnout of any of North Carolina's biggest cities was like 23% in Asheville. I think they had a turnout.
Yeah,
I mean,
know
fewer
Raleigh's
than a
was
quarter.
way down
Raleigh's was actually higher than it had been.
during the
I
primary.
think definitely during the primary, but I think it was higher than it had been 4 years before, 2 years before. But so the turnout was up a little bit overall, but still, you're talking about, I think Raleigh was at like 17% turnout or
Wow.
something. I
Yeah.
mean that. And Chapel Hill was like 17 or 18% turnout. So
Yeah.
even here, we think we're so enlightened.
Right.
A lot
Yeah.
of people not voting.
Right.
And so, I don't know that anyone has an easy answer for how do you engage people and get them to vote and keep them engaged. I do think, I'm pretty convinced of one thing, which is people have a legitimate reason to be frustrated with politics and to feel like it's not inspiring to them to be involved right now. We have a lack of inspiring leadership at pretty much all levels of politics. And I think that, for instance, in Virginia this week, you saw some major upsets by Democrats. And one of the things that really impressed me about Virginia was in their legislative races, they had a very diverse and new set of faces who were running.
Yeah.
People who I think were able to maybe turn out an extra 400 to 1,000 voters because people were like, hey, I like you. You sound different. You look different.
Yeah.
You feel different. I think I might actually want to support you. And in a legislative race and an off-year election like that, if you get an extra 1,000 people to vote for you, you win.
Yeah.
And so they upset some incumbent Republicans, I think, with some of that.
That's a good way.
Yeah, because I know Virginia is, I mean, we're both native Virginians before we came to North Carolina, is much the same way as Chapel Hill in the sense that you have these relatively urban metropolitan areas that are, deep blue, and then you have the rest of the state, which is really red. And it's mostly a numbers game at that point, is that how many people can you get out in those blue to swing it from purple over.
Right. So most of the victories in Virginia yesterday were in Northern Virginia, and that's similar to we would expect that what we've seen here in the last couple of years, that the Democratic gains have mostly been in like Wake and Mecklenburg counties. We've had a couple of victories in places like Asheville, and we had one victory in Harnett County that we then lost in the 2016 Trump election. So like you see some places where Democrats can break through outside of the urban and suburban areas, usually because there's a local issue that's motivating some change in that issue. So like 2014, we had a Democrat who won in Harnett County, large part because the fracking bill had just passed, and the people there were really mad at their legislator from that county had run the fracking bill, and they were worried about the impact of that on their community.
Yeah.
But then in 2016, when that issue had gone away and there was a Trump wave in rural North Carolina, then we lost that seat that we had just picked up. And so Brad Salmon, who was the Democrat that held that seat for 2 years, he was the first person that told me in 2016 that we were about to get beat by Trump, and I didn't believe him. But he named everything that was about to happen, and he was right because he's living in that rural community and was able to see where the disconnection was. And I still continue to call Brad to this day when we're thinking about policy issues or political issues to say, like, how is this going to work in rural North Carolina? How would this fly in Harnett County? Yeah. Not just because I want to be able to win in those areas, but because I actually want the Democratic platform to be a platform that takes care of those rural areas.
Yeah, and what do you think about that sort of rural-urban tension? Because I know once Trump won, everybody's like, you got to run out and get your copy of Hillbilly Elegy. This is going to tell you. I mean, Shannon and I grew up in rural Virginia, places that are relatively rural. And we're familiar with rural, North Carolina, Virginia by our experiences. On the other hand, you have a lot of people that are progressive who are like, you know what? I'm not dealing with these people. They don't seem to care about me. Why should I care about them? How do you manage to form that kind of coalition where, everybody has a greater depth of each other's issues? You talk about Moral Monday having the interest groups kind of work together. I think a lot of people in rural North Carolina or any rural area probably are like, well, that's great, but, I'm over here starving and no one's really sticking up for me.
Well, it's unfortunate that we become so polarized that we can dismiss people with broad brushstrokes.
Yeah.
Number one, I think that North Carolinians, not being a native, but one of the things I've come to appreciate about North Carolinians is that North Carolinians almost universally love their rural roots. Mm-hmm. Even if they live in one of the major areas of the state, they've got some family or some background that is connected to rural North Carolina. And so there's a history here and an ethos about the importance of rural areas that needs to stay true in our politics no matter who's in charge. We need to take care of our rural communities. And when it comes to, kind of the labels that liberals throw out that are very dismissive of rural people, labeling them as redneck or racist or whatever, I think that that's a disservice to the greater good of an American body politic. I absolutely will stand up and fight against racism, whether it be in policy or practice or personal relationships. But my goal is not to defeat those people. My goal is to win them over.
Yeah.
My goal is to figure out a way to engage with them, to convince them to be more inclusive, and to build a stronger society by coming together. Yeah. And dismissing them, talking down to them, being condescending to them does not win people over. We need to do a much better job of putting listening at the forefront of our politics, and being able to really, just interpersonally listen to people who are different from us, and collectively try and hear the voices of people who feel like they're marginalized.
Yeah.
And there are rural people who have very legitimate reasons to feel marginalized in today's economy, and we need to understand that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Most of my family is rural, so that's where I grew up.
And that's where I think people, even in a community like ours here in Chapel Hill, who say, well, what can we do? We're so blue here. Mm-hmm. Well, if you know people who are in rural communities, you grew up in those communities, you have a way to stay engaged with them and help to win them over, we actually need you to do that, even if it's across state lines.
Yeah. Will do.
Do it.
Phil will do it too. I'm trying to think of more questions.
Well, so
I was like, I keep going back to music.
All right.
So
no, we can
we can go back.
We can go back to music. Yeah.
Phil's like he's like, oh, well, talk about politics.
I like talking about politics, but I don't talk about it 24/7. So
I guess I'm a little more private with my talk on politics, but
hopefully there were more people that were private about their politics, right?
I don't like talking about it so much on Facebook.
It's hard. That's fascinating, right? Like, politics is hard to talk about interpersonally, and so people do talk about it on Facebook because you don't actually have to listen.
Yeah.
All you have to do is speak on Facebook. That's not what we should be striving for.
Well, it's just so flippant. Like, it's not a conversation,
Right.
and it's more of a statement, and you leave.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's not all I'm trying to say. So it's just like, I try not to get engaged. But, I have friends and family that I adore, love, respect, all of that. And we're not on the same page with some issues. But, at the core, we're on the same page, and it's just if you can keep those things into perspective and respect each other,
Yeah.
So
but
do you have a strategy for kind of trying to bring them to see your perspective a little better?
I think because some of them are my elders. I don't feel like they're old, but I mean there's that I guess that Southern level of respect that you just don't.
Right.
You don't talk to them about it. You don't engage. I mean, I think if there was something really bad, harmful, kind of thing going on, I would probably speak up. But I feel like I can't change their minds. They feel how they feel. They have their reasons for it. And some of those reasons I get, but it's like sometimes they may not be valid in my perspective. But conversely, they don't engage with me because they probably feel the same way. Oh, she's not going to change her mind. She just believes what she wants to believe.
Are they right?
But yeah. But I mean, it's about the big ones with like women's, abortion and things like that. And it's like, that's one issue that I don't think you can really change people's minds on. And so, you don't want to.
Yeah, I agree. And
I don't want to go there.
I think you can. I think you can win them over, maybe not in whole, but in part. I think what we do wrong is we try to win people over by convincing them rather than starting with listening to them.
Right.
So the strategy I would give you is ask them questions to which you don't already know the answer.
God, you sound like my therapist.
I'm a social worker.
That's
There
exactly
you go.
what he would tell me.
Because if you know the answer to a question, it's not a question.
Right.
You're just trying to lead
Right.
them to an answer
Right.
you want them to have. But if you ask them questions that you're sincerely interested in finding the
Right.
answer, you're engaging them in a sincere conversation. You can look for common ground.
Yeah.
You open up the dialogue in a way that they might ask you questions
Yeah.
back. You can start to have that dialogue.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that dialogue, then we just end up stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, Dr. Chuck said, be truly curious. Like if you're
Yeah, there
entering,
you go. I like that. Be truly curious.
yeah,
Thank you,
like
Dr.
if you're,
Chuck.
I know he's awesome.
That's good.
But like if we would fight, and we are standing firm on our opinions about something, he's like, be curious with each other. Do we do that all the time? No, but we should. I mean, no, it's really great advice. I probably put more effort and do that with like coworkers and stuff that I have a strained relationship
It's
with
hard with your
than
family.
I do with people that I
Yeah, you get
So
tired.
it doesn't make sense.
It's
but,
hard with your
you
family,
know,
but if you want to end racism, or
Yeah.
if you want to fight for the liberation of women's bodies, I mean,
Yeah.
any of those things, the most powerful people that you can have those conversations with are your family.
yeah.
So it's Thanksgiving time, everybody.
Yeah.
That's
I feel
right.
I feel
Be
very
genuinely curious.
I feel very fortunate that I don't have anyone in my family that is racist. And so that I do feel I feel very fortunate about, and I grew up in a very, I guess in that regard,
Yeah.
just a very, you know, welcoming environment and family.
Yeah.
And we, you know, my grandparents were tobacco farmers, and their property was on a street in a historically black neighborhood. So he needed them to kind of help him do the work, you know. So, I mean, there was a relationship there, and it was respect and help, and it was like neighborly, and, you know, it was just, you know, this is just how you treat people, you know, and, yeah, so.
Yeah, I you know, as a white person in the South, you know, I've unfortunately had relatives that, you know, I did not see eye to eye on racial issues. Part of it because of, I mean, I don't want to give them the easy out of, also they're deceased, but the product of their time and place in rural Virginia in Jim Crow. And it is, you know, a difficult legacy, I think, many people that have lived in the South have to struggle with, of how complicit they've been in that. You know, it's easy to blame it on someone like the Klan, but everybody countenanced it, generally speaking.
Yep.
And that's always, I think, the problem. As you know, one thing I was curious is we were living in Mebane in northern Orange County. And so we're living out in the country, you know, and yeah, I like to wear cowboy boots sometimes. And it's funny, our neighbor who, and he's an awesome guy. And, you know, we were hanging out in the mailbox one day. His property is near my property, you know, and I was wearing my cowboy boots. And he starts talking about Shannon the liberal. Well, I mean, I'm not exactly, you know, a raging conservative, and yet because I think of the cowboy boots and listening to country music and stuff, people start making these assumptions.
I'm the wild one.
And, you know, yeah, I guess. And you know, Shannon's wearing black and all that, you know, so, you know, she's not a Baptist, you know, so, but, yeah.
She plays loud music.
Right,
You
yeah.
look like a punk rock girl.
Well, yeah, but having those, you know, conversations, about some of those really tender issues within your own family. You know, my grandma, for some reason, loved Ronald Reagan. My grandma, who needed Medicaid and Medicare, you know,
Yeah.
went on and on. He seems like such a nice man and everything. Like,
Because he was an actor.
Grandma, please, for God's sakes, you take medication and you're on. You know, you're poor. You don't have a lot of money. You know, and there is a really tough slog sometimes. Not necessarily to change, like you're saying, to change someone's mind, but to say, you know, don't you think, like in North Carolina, you know, we have a policy because of the ACA that we turned away federal funding for Medicaid and Medicare, which, like it or not, led to people not getting the care they needed and probably dying.
Yeah. Yes.
That's something we should be able to all talk about, regardless of the other differences, and yet it seems awfully tough sometimes.
This is a time for courage.
Yeah,
Stakes in
yeah.
this country are high. It's easy to retreat into our corners given the social media and big news media world that we have and the segregation we have in housing. It's very easy to retreat in your corner. This is a time for courage. If we want the United States to be truly united, if we want to live up to all of the ideals of this country, I don't think there's any question that this is a time for us to be courageous in trying to find ways to connect across difference with people in lots of different ways, not just partisan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that does bring me to a point. It's so easy to beat up on Phil Berger. I mean, I personally have something against him because he's ruining the Phil brand. I'm sorry.
Should we start calling you Philip?
Right. Oh, no, you don't. No. No. But yeah,
Who called you Philip in your childhood?
my
and hurt your
mom.
feelings?
I got the full 3-name deal. Did you have the 3-name deal? Philip Jason Venable. And you knew, and you started thinking, what could they possibly know that I've done among the many things that I actually have done?
You're a Philip Jason. Should we go with PJ?
Oh, okay. I would say someone tried to do that with me when I was in 6th grade. Like, let's give you a nickname. Let's call you PJ. Tried and tried.
Didn't stick.
It did not stick.
You don't have a nickname?
Just Phil.
You don't have a radio DJ name? You didn't have a band name?
I was a college DJ too, but I was so hungover most of the time because it was a morning shift, and that's when I realized most people didn't want to hear Sonic Youth in the morning, like you're saying, or something else. And then there were these times when I'd have to put on the long record because I had to go throw up. But, because I was really hungover. I mean, I thought to myself, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday? That can't be bad. There are people that you work with across the aisle. You just referenced Margaret Spellings. Who in the General Assembly do you consider someone that's, I guess, maybe a little more pragmatic as opposed to partisan, that's maybe a little more flexible?
I did a speaking gig this morning with Senator Tamara Beringer from Wake County. She and I have worked together on a number of things related to foster care legislation and child welfare issues, I guess. She's a foster parent and adopted kids from foster care. We have a child who's adopted from foster care. So we have a lot of common ground on some issues that aren't major partisan issues.
Oh, I was just going to say, okay, so I started a women's group, resource group at my work, at my job. And we are having a volunteer fair tomorrow. We are hosting local organizations, and one is Durham Foster Care.
Excellent.
They're coming. Orange County Rape Crisis Center is coming. The Orange County Senior Center is coming. So that people can get connected to resources in their community and also sign up to volunteer.
Well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope you get tons of sign-ups.
Me too. That would be great.
And even
or
one
at least,
new foster parent makes a huge difference.
or at least know that these organizations exist to help you or to help someone that needs this. Especially, a lot of women take on the adult care for their parents, and it's like, well, there's a senior center that can maybe help you, with some things. So, but yeah, anyways,
that's
sorry.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Well, that's interesting that you're able to. It seems like you focus on a tangible issue that you both can relate to.
It's easier to work across party lines when you have a shared interest, and it's an issue that isn't a political football, but is something where there's not clear ideological lines. We may have differences in opinion or philosophy about the right policy approach or the way to fund that type of stuff, but it's not the type of big political issue that rises up to be above the fold on the News and Observer. So it's much easier to work across party lines on something like that. The Republicans who are in charge and who set the political agenda, I don't get to work with them on much. They don't want to work with me on much.
All right.
It's really finding other people who are a little bit more backbenchers and finding some common ground.
What do you, and this is, think it is. I mean, that, you're able to work with someone across party lines on this issue, and you have this shared interest in. And then it seems like something happens where, I guess, as the issue becomes more visible, or maybe there's more money at stake, or there's a cultural value at stake, where this kind of antagonism just comes out.
Yeah, I mean, those things are all some of the factors that contribute to it. There are issues where we have sincere and deeply held different belief systems, and so we're fighting over something that is actually a difference in kind of moral code,
Right.
and that's deep. And then there's other issues where we're just fighting for political advantage.
Right.
This issue is owned by one party over the other, and it motivates our base, and maybe the other party doesn't even care about it that much, but you're trying not to lose political points, so you end up fighting over it.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I think, especially when it comes to not only, I guess if your argument carries the day, it carries the day regardless of maybe the logic of it. But when you start fixing the game, like districting and things like that, that seems to be above and beyond.
Right. That's what I was going to say. My experience is not that the arguments have been won based on logic or research. The arguments that we've had the biggest fights over have been won purely on political power, and that power has been accrued through cheating, through gerrymandering lines to be unfairly drawn, to bias votes towards, vote outcomes towards one party over the other, by disenfranchisement of voting, through restrictions on voter access, and by massive, massive amounts of money in the system. Those things all skew politics away from the type of reasoned debate that the United States would like to believe we're still the foremost practitioner of. But, our current political structure is difficult. Yeah, we need fair rules. We need rules that incentivize real meaningful conversation and collaboration, and compromise. And there are issues that I won't want to compromise on if we get into the majority, but we'll have to compromise on because we won't have a supermajority. We'd never be able to slam things through the way the Republicans have in North Carolina. But I think we'll have better government if we have a more closely divided legislature, and we have to figure out how to work together better. It will be better for the people of North Carolina. I won't get everything I want, but it'll be better than where we are today.
Yeah. So this prompting me to ask you another question.
Give me a music question.
Okay.
So bitter now.
So, who influenced you on music? Like for me, I had awesome parents. My dad, they had parties and their friends would come over and they'd all play guitar and play Beatles songs. And so I kind of grew up with this appreciation for music. It was always in my house. And then my parents let me go off and get my own music. But, how did you start your love and passion for music?
So my parents are big appreciators of the arts, and so we went to a lot of arts activities when I was a kid, and I was often engaged in arts activities at my parents' push, and I think that was part of it. We certainly went to a lot of concerts and was exposed to stuff, enjoyed that. But my parents' music, my parents were 1960s hippies, so that was their music.
Cool.
I grew up in Cleveland in the inner city in the 1980s.
Wow.
My music was hip-hop. It was street music. And so I had very different things that I was exposed to. I actually...
Did they get that at all? Or did they were like, no rap in my house?
No, they were totally cool with it.
Okay, good.
In fact,
some parents were not.
The first concert that I ever went to was my parents took me. It was New Edition's first tour.
Nice.
When the opening acts were the Fat Boys and UTFO.
Yeah.
Well,
and we were like the only white people there. But my parents took me. I was in like 6th grade.
Wow.
That was awesome.
That's very cool.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
That was pretty hip.
That is.
And then the second one, my mom took me to see Huey Lewis in the News. So that was the second one.
Okay, I feel better now.
Huey Lewis.
Yeah. My first concert was Bachman Turner Overdrive opening for Van Hagar. It was pretty lame.
Oh, that's good. I mean, come on, that music's fun.
It is now. Yeah, it is now.
It's
But at the
fun.
time, you're
I love to listen to Huey Lewis in the News now. It's fun music.
Okay.
It's kind of unnerving on that movie, American Psycho, right?
Yes,
It's a little
correct.
unnerving. It's like, I don't know, it kind of fits in
Correct.
this murderous scene.
Why is this working so well? What does this say about me?
But when I show
Yeah.
up at the Kraken and I see Too Much Fun playing and they're just playing Blue Eyed Soul with a harmonica, it's not that different than Huey Lewis and the News, and
Yeah.
it's a blast. I have a
Yeah.
couple beers and I listen to that. It's
Right
great.
on.
If there was a Van Halen cover band, I was never a big Van Halen guy. I was never really a big classic rock guy. If there was a Van Halen cover band, I would enjoy that. It's
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
there was, I
I'd
think,
say,
a time and place for Van Halen, and that
yeah,
time and
no,
place
I
is
dig-
gone.
I dig
You know,
some
those
Van
first
Halen,
couple
not
Van
some
Halen
Van
records.
Hagar.
Yeah, so
so
I
much.
wanted to go
I like
to the
the cheese
1984.
with the
I
day
wanted
they
to go to
roll.
the 1984 tour
you
because
saw them too late.
it came to the Romick Civic Center, but I think I was in Dutch with the folks, so I couldn't. So, but at the time, Van Hagar rolled through. I was
Yeah.
15, maybe. Yeah, so I could go to the Civic Center, but yeah. So, well, that's interesting that you got to see the Fat Boys. See,
Yeah.
I remember. You
Right.
know, that was.
Coming out
So, what
with
was your
the human
favorite
beatbox and all
What
that.
was your favorite part of the show? Of that show, was it New Edition? Were you like a big New
Oh,
Edition fan?
I love New Edition.
Yeah. Were you?
Their
Okay.
harmonies are fantastic. That was their first record with like Mr. Telephone Man and Popcorn Lover. Those are great pop songs. Those are just phenomenal.
So did you
songs.
follow the splinter group, the splittering of like Belle Biv DeVoe?
I went with the Belle Biv DeVoe side.
You
I
couldn't
wasn't-
go with
I never fell in love with Bobby Brown after he went solo after that. I mean,
Not
he
even
had
My
good songs.
Prerogative. My Prerogative was a
That's
good
song.
tune.
Yeah, it's a good song. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of like my middle school years, and then in high school was when I actually first got introduced to like rock music.
Oh, okay.
My first week of high school, my new friends were like, "Hey, we're going to see this movie by U2 on Friday. Do you want to go?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Who's U2?" And they couldn't
Yeah.
believe I didn't know who U2 was. And we went to see Rattle and Hum.
Nice.
yeah.
I know people now, lots of even U2 fans don't like Rattle and Hum. That movie was amazing
Right.
to me because I
Yeah.
had never seen them before. I guess I had heard like Where the Streets Have No Name or some of their big hits. But the scope of that movie and the connection that they were making between American music and what they were doing was really, I loved it. I thought it was great. So
Yeah.
then I became a U2 fan.
Oh yeah. Well, so what's your favorite U2 record? I'm an Octung Baby person mostly because it doesn't sound like another U2 record.
I love
Really?
Achtung Baby. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably my favorite. That album's an incredible piece of artwork from start to finish. But the Joshua Tree is also beautiful
Yeah.
and still really
Yeah.
easy to enjoy.
Yeah, I suffer from the overplay effect. I think of that record. You know, it really was just driven home.
Right.
You know, that was when they broke big. You
Right.
know, well, I guess what was the one before Unforgettable Fire? Was that it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good album.
That one was like
a bunch
it,
of their early
it
stuff
was.
is good.
I liked that enough, and like of course some of War and Boy, but then this minute that I guess Where the Streets Had No Name, it was kind of like you will never escape from this song ever again. I mean, it's the same deal like Nirvana or Pearl Jam. You know, it's like you hear some songs, you're like you can't really hear them because it's just there's so much baggage of having heard it so many times that you're like. Done.
Nirvana is my biggest miss. I never got to see them live before Kurt died, and that's my
Yeah.
biggest regret in music.
I know they I have some like my ex-husband and some of his friends, and they're my friends too, but went to see them play the Old Cradle right before they got big.
Would have been amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I know. I worked in Seattle when I was in college, and I have a ton of friends that saw them in all these little Seattle shows and
They
everything.
still
It was
talk about it.
You need to
Yeah.
talk to John Howie because his band opened for Nirvana before.
Really? I
Oh,
didn't
they
know
did.
that.
Finger, yeah.
Wow.
Finger
cool.
opened for Nirvana, and I remember, of course, you know, same kind of. Well, you know, what was it like?
Did you get into Mudhoney at all?
No,
Yeah.
because I never could do metal.
Yeah.
I think like hip hop
Little
is
too
so
hard.
different from metal that I just couldn't get there, and I've never
Yeah.
been a metalhead.
It's like a texture thing.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
But back to your question about who's my favorite North Carolina bands, I was trying to think like contemporary, but I've told John this. I've only talked to John Howie once or twice, but I told him this one time. You Ruined Everything is on my top 5 albums all time.
Yeah.
That $2 Pistols album is the greatest breakup record that I've ever heard.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
think it's incredible.
Yeah.
I managed them at that point. That was when that record came
And
out.
you were going through a breakup too, right?
Oh my God! Yeah, let me tell you this story real quick. There's this song on that record called "There Goes a Heartache." I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
There Goes
So
a
that's
Heartache.
about me.
Really?
Oh,
Well, no. So
Phil
he told me
is the heart.
he goes. I said, this is a really great song. He goes, yeah, it's kind of about you and your ex-wife and me in a relationship. And I was like, wow. Not sure how I feel about that. As a songwriter, I now understand what it's like to be on the other side of the equation. But yeah, it was weird. It was weird for about,
I wonder if he tells that to everybody.
May he might.
He's
The
still
greatest mixtape I ever made is titled "There Goes a Heartache" after that song.
Oh yeah.
And now I've got the
Nice.
backstory.
You're talking
Nice.
This is great.
Mr.
Thanks,
Mr. Heartache.
thanks for having me on, ANC. I am now fulfilled. I don't know what you guys got out of this, but
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Greg.
thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
really
It
glad
was-
to be
it was
here.
cool
Thank you
to
for
have
the
you on.
enjoyable conversation. It's fun to mix music and politics.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And maybe we'll come down to your office and spin some records.
Yeah, please come spin a record. Anybody who
Yeah.
wants to come to the General Assembly when I'm there, which isn't always, but you're welcome to come pick out the record of the day and see what's in the collection, or bring a record. You guys got a bunch of records
Yeah.
looking right in front of me.
Yes.
You could bring one that you
Hey,
want to
look,
spin.
we even have a local shelf.
Yeah, we did.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we're gonna have to look through this
is
before I go.
Local. We have a local shelf, and then I try to sort it by like genre. My jazz, my country, my soul.
There's like a Husker Du section. Two Husker Du related.
It's totally a Husker Du.
Nice. I love the
Grant
Huskers.
Hart.
That's great.
Bob Mould section. They
Yeah,
needed
yeah.
a whole section.
Sugar was one of the first like indie rock bands that I really fell for.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
really?
good.
You could deal with that, but not Mudhoney, huh? It was the guitar tone of
Well,
Mudhoney.
I
was
mean,
just-
yeah. Bob Mould can be kind of.
But it's not
Loud.
metal. It's loud.
Yeah.
Dinosaur Jr. was my favorite band when in the
Yeah.
mid '90s, so I can deal with loud. But it was
Yeah.
like crossing over from like Nirvana to Soundgarden. Like
yeah.
Soundgarden's fine, but they were just a little too metal. There's
Yeah.
some line in there for me that I couldn't
Uh-huh.
cross.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I kind of get some of that in the sense of like I remember speaking of Seattle, I had a friend of mine that worked at the Fantagraphics factory right before grunge broke big, and he would send us, we were college buds, and he would send, like our dorm, a tape every so often, and we're like, kind of scratch our heads, and it's kind of interesting that everything sounds kind of the same, man, and then. We heard Nirvana, we heard Mudhoney, and to truth be told, like, I really couldn't see much of it, like, recognize much of it.
Right.
Well, except for the, like a song of, like, lots of hooks to me, like Touch Me, I'm Sick or something. That was one thing.
Right.
But then a lot of the first Nirvana record and some of the other Mudhoney stuff, it sounded a little generic. I know that's probably blasphemy to some extent. But then, I guess, like, 90. Or 91, all those guys suddenly
91,
like
right.
up their game,
Right.
Yeah.
91. The year the punk broke. Mudhoney just did an interview on Sound Opinions where they trashed Nirvana. It was fascinating to hear them be so
That's
blunt
funny.
about it.
Well,
That's so funny.
the
Mark
funny
Arm,
thing is
huh?
that Mark Arm and
Yeah.
I think there was a band called the Walkabouts from Seattle that
Right.
I love. They're like more Americana, and a couple other people. They all worked for the Muzak Corporation.
Really?
They would all meet in their little break room and talk about their bands, and they worked at the Muzak Corporation.
Well, you gotta get paid.
Yep.
All
All
right.
right. Well, we'll have you over again.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, NC. Have a
Hey.
good day.
Yeah.
Nancy.
And this let you know, this is the first episode where we may have music, so you're the first guy that's had music.
Nice.
On
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Phil Venable Originals.
Nice. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
We'll
Well, we
listen to the
hope.
playback.
Yeah.
All right. Take
Bye.
care.